What is up, guys? Welcome back to Think Shank. Today, we are going to do a good old double click onto the Sacramento Kings. A lot of buzz, a lot of head spinning, and really a lot of questions as to why this team, particularly after acquiring DeMar DeRozan for functionally just swapping him out for Harrison Barnes, with such a big fall off, even looking back to last year where they were bounced in, I guess, the second round of the NBA play-in. I want to start with where I usually tend to start when I'm taking a closer look at specific teams and look at the interplay between frequency of shots according to regions on the floor versus their efficiency at said regions. Really a quick pulse check on how effectively you are either executing the game plan or how effectively the game plan is suited towards your roster. So I made some interesting discoveries about how the Kings offense is working. At the rim, they are dead last in the entire NBA in frequency. However, they are second in efficiency. So they rarely take shots at the rim, but they are very, very efficient when they do. Behind the three-point line, they are 21st in frequency, bottom third, not very on brand, and they are also 25th in efficiency. Last but not least, and probably the most interesting part of all of this, is they are first in the NBA in mid-range frequency, but they're also first in efficiency. So off the bat, I think that there are some misconceptions about how this team is trying to attack. And I have to say, I don't think it's as simple as pointing at DeMar DeRozan, mid-range maestro, loves getting to his spots on the elbows and rising and firing. De'Aaron Fox as well, and during that breakout offensive season, he was shooting pretty much lights out in there on top of really effective foul drawing and was knocking down a ton of his free throws, which I don't know why. He just stopped making free throws as of last year as well. It was one of the biggest points that I just never understood. Already, you can see some pretty surprising discoveries inside of that, where you have the watered-down version of the Warriors in the bottom third of three-point line frequency, really not shooting a lot of threes, and then when they do, they are really, really not making a lot of them, and a lot of times they are shrinking the floor and opting for high level of difficulty mid-range pull-ups, where sure, guys like Fox and DeRozan are very, very adept at scoring from, but as a consistent diet of that kind of attack, when you are not enabling really sound spacing with really, really good shooting on the perimeter, you can see how this model becomes pretty unsustainable pretty quickly. Yeah, being dead last in rim attempts kind of makes sense when you think about the fact that Sabonis is always just doing dribble handoffs and is pulled so far from the rim anyway, compounded with the fact that really getting off the bounce to the rim and finishing is just tough, again, because of the spacing barrier that the Kings are putting on themselves. Double-clicking on the threes, which everybody, I think, still associates with them being the little brother franchise to the Warriors, they're shooting horrendously, pretty much uniformly across their rotation guys. Fox is at 35%, Keegan Murray's at 27%, Kevin Huerter's at 28%, Monk is at 38%, and then Ellis is at 45%. Fox has never been an incredibly potent outside shooter. I think you see him really step up his confidence when he is actually able to get himself or somebody else is able to get him about 5-ish feet of space. He is very, very good at obviously knocking down those kinds of looks, and you see that especially off of offensive rebounds, for example. But Keegan Murray and Kevin Huerter shooting 27 and 28% from three, respectively, is just functionally not going to enable the spacing that these downhill guys, particularly Fox, kind of needs in order to get into his office in the short mid-range as well as the charity stripe. Monk, I think, is going to look up. He obviously has been injured quite a bit, a majority of this season so far, just getting back in and getting the start the other night against San Antonio. And Keon Ellis just doesn't take enough threes, really preferring to be that connective player who is looking to pass first. Honestly, I just think he does need to shoot more because, again, it is just so unsustainable when you just don't have enough perimeter threats and you are just not letting the defense keep anybody honest, including DeRozan and Fox, who you really, really need to be able to get where their spots are to be effective. What I want to do now is double click a bit on the last two games that the Kings have played. They've lost to the Portland Trailblazers and the San Antonio Spurs, and it has been an absolute shitstorm of kind of finger pointing, a lot of emotional post-game conferences from Coach Mike Brown. It has just been absolutely deflating and demoralizing, not just the fact that these are losses going on the win and loss columns, but it's the way that this team is losing, particularly when weighed against and put in contrast to the ways that they had exceeded before. Again, thinking about the off-ball movement, dribble handoffs, and potentially some anomalous shooting, as we are seeing right now. Starting now with the terrible Portland Trailblazers loss. Down, Jeremy Grant, Scoot Henderson, Donovan Clingan allowed the Blazers to shoot 55% from the field in the second half of that game, and got absolutely murdered in the paint, allowing for 69 paint points, really coming to a head with none other than DeAndre Ayton going for 26 points, 9 rebounds, and 58% from the floor. Most of that game was some of the easiest advantage creation and off-the-dribble penetration I might have seen literally all season, and I've seen some pretty terrible teams play this year. Kings being 12th overall in the West is absolutely no surprise, and really Mike Brown double-clicked immediately on that in the postgame. He essentially went on a 12-minute dialogue, beating with a cane the fact that nobody, and I mean nobody, could contain the ball at the point of attack.
The whole 2 days, these guys, they want to hit the paint. They want to hit the paint. They want to hit the paint. We have to shift. We got to stay in front of the ball. And we need somebody to be able to guard the dribble drive. They were going past us almost every single play with zero resistance. 64 points in the paint and shot 29% from the three. They didn't shoot enough threes. We kept telling our guys, shrink the floor, but it starts with guarding the frickin' ball. We have to have somebody that wants to guard the ball and not just get out and score an offense. 19 second chance points. Those are the two things we told them. Box out and shift to contain the dribble drive. Box out and shift to contain the dribble drive. And a telltale sign of this game tonight, there were 10 50-50 balls, 10 loose balls, 10 of them. We got one of them. And it came with less than 5 minutes to go. And there were plenty of times that ball's bouncing, I got guys trying to run out in transition. A lot of guys that say this about the offense or that about the offense. We got to figure out if we want to come, not most nights, not some nights, but every night and do our job defensively. And it starts with guarding the ball, then boxing out while making sure that we shift. We got to do our job defensively. And if the ball is bouncing, don't leak out until we get it. Just basic fundamental basketball about being locked in. Just disappointing tonight, starting with me. Disappointing from me on down.
These dudes on the Blazers were not primary, secondary, even tertiary ball handlers when they had their full roster. But these guys were just so easily able to penetrate, touch the paint, and even worse, finish in there with higher percentage looks than from the outside. We'll circle back on that in a second, but I think it's important to just call this out because I think that there's a lot of spotlight on the Kings' three-point and perimeter defense overall. I'll give you some foreshadowing. They are absolutely terrible at all three levels, but specifically in that loss, that was the key to it. For an NBA Cup game, too, I know this shit doesn't matter at all, but like, Jesus fucking Christ. If Clingan had played, he literally might have had a 40-point game. I'm not even kidding. It would have been absolutely atrocious. Moving now over to San Antonio yesterday, Sunday, where the Kings lose at home and Victor Wembanyama takes all the spotlight, going for 34 points, 11 assists. The entire script gets flipped on its head, where it was obviously the three-point shooting that did the Kings in. Before the game, it's worth noting Malik Monk gets the start at the starting 2 spot. Mike Brown, after the game, was asked about that and literally said, I just needed to shake something up because we were not succeeding with the rotations that we had in lead up, so why not, essentially. They go up 17 by the end of the first, but you just see that get steadily eroded to the point where they were only up 5 points by the start of the fourth. And this all completely collapsed to really start the third quarter, where the Spurs go on a 21-7 run against the Kings. And I think that the dissection of their performance in this game is actually the most telling of their infrastructural, more genetic level of issue here when you think about the root of everything. The Kings had 19 more possessions. They had a 21-8 offensive rebounding edge. They had a 25-7 points off turnover edge. And they had a 24-4 fast break point edge. Won the possession battle, murdered the offensive glass, ran away on the fast break, and especially off of turnovers, but they still lost the game. Well, why is that? Isn't that the dumbest question anybody could ever ask in 2024? They lost because they fell in the three-point battle by a margin of 23-12. The Kings only made 12 threes in the entire home game against the San Antonio Spurs. 8 more threes is how many more points? 24. That's a lot of fucking points. And again, you think about all of those incredible margins, honestly, that are great uplifting signs in fast break points, turning guys over, cleaning the offensive glass, and overall positioning themselves with way more possessions overall. They just literally could not hit threes enough to keep pace. All of this goes to show me that came out in that matchup with great energy on offense and locking in at least early on in the first half, turning the ball over and building momentum by getting easier looks and buckets in the open floor. But ultimately, and especially during that 21-7 beating in the third quarter, they just couldn't stop bleeding wide open threes. And this is not a case of Victor Wembanyama being 7-4 and just shooting over everybody and going lights out Kevin Durant mode, or Devin Vassell finally becoming the Bradley Beal archetype that he's probably destined for. No, these are threes that Derrick Jones Jr. would probably hit at a 90% clip because they're so fucking open. So those two losses were atrocious, and they were rooted in completely inversed defensive regions. The Portland game in the paint, they literally could not stop anybody at the point of attack from getting into the paint and finishing over them, spearheaded by DeAndre Ayton. And then 2 days later against the Spurs, they respond with a ton of energy, coming out and doing all of these little things to come out against the San Antonio Spurs, but still aren't able to come away with a victory because they literally cannot make enough threes. So stepping all the way back now, this is the atrophy of the three-point arc in the Sacramento Kings inventory. By opponent field goal percentage, they are 18th at defending the rim, 27th in defending the mid-range, and 28th at defending the three-point line. Like I already said, these threes, especially against San Antonio at home, were absolutely wide open, which validates the 28th from three, and a lot of the footage you will see of the Kings this year is it's really not that teams are just happening to shoot really well. They are just generating such easy looks from the outside. And it's interesting as well because being 27th in the mid-range and then 28th in the three-point line, I do believe that they are interrelated because, again, of that point of attack defense or the lack thereof. If you do not have guys able to contain the ball at the point of the attack and get taken off the bounce pretty easily, what does that mean in the modern NBA? If guys touch the paint, it's coming right the fuck back out unless you're Giannis. That's it. If you're killing him in the mid-range by shooting that efficiently there, that means you're probably able to touch the paint as well, which then, of course, unlocks the three. The overall takeaway here is that the Kings have essentially completely reversed what their strengths had been during that breakout offensive season 2-3 years ago now. They don't take or make any threes, and they don't defend the threes either. It's kind of like the exact opposite of the Boston Celtics. Refuse to win or even chuck threes from the outside. Clearly, guys aren't shooting well, but the fact that these attempts have just shrunk to the extent that they have, to me, is a huge, huge indicator of a mental or psychological factor being at play. Keegan Murray's only in his third year. Kevin Huerter has pretty much every single year now had a very volatile outside shot. And then, of course, he had his health concerns to close last year, and he's already kind of nicked up this year. And then on the other end, they are just unable to effectively contain the point of attack from preventing guys from getting into the paint to spray out for threes or just in general create these rotations. And then as well, they cannot effectively communicate on these switches or non-switches that really, really came back to bite them in that Spurs matchup. And so this boils down to a very simple concept that we hear all the time whenever there is commentary on the broadcast, other YouTube channels, coaches, players, etc. You hear this phrase that goes, well, our defense sparked our offense, and all of a sudden we could get out and run, score easily in the open floor, capitalize on mismatches and transition, especially if we're a high degree of switching team and you're not matched up with the right guy and now we have a mismatch and yada yada. The thing I want to point out about that is you absolutely have never heard the vice versa. Nobody has literally ever said our offense has sparked our defense and that's how we won the game. No. Why is that? It's because when you compete defensively, you give yourself a chance and you are providing a higher floor of which you can compete against the other team when you are obviously getting stops. It makes very intuitive sense, but especially when you think about a team like the Kings that has been so notoriously branded as an offensive-leaning team, and they don't invest in defense, and Keegan Murray is going to have to defend literally everybody every single night who is a top 15 player. And people are always like, well, why isn't Keegan Murray averaging 20 points a game yet? Well, it's because he's guarding Anthony Edwards and then Jason Tatum and then SGA and over and over and over again and doing a ton of that legwork because, again, this defense sucks balls, and if you don't have a high enough floor on that end of the court, you are just not going to give yourself enough of a chance. Unless you have a top 3 to 5 offense in the league, which is clearly the vision the GM and owner had previously concocted and defined for this team, especially getting DeMar DeRozan. It's also clearly the message that this roster has had, because galvanizing them to give a shit on defense seems like something that not even Greg Popovich, Mark Dagnall, Joe Mazzulla can even do. Because like I've been saying for years, no one on this roster, takes pride in defending. Literally nobody. I still don't even qualify Keegan Murray as that because he definitely wants to showcase more of his offensive game. Obviously, the trade over the summer is not going to help enable that. And B is toughness. I think that is kind of the underlying joke, or at least the driver of the joke that has enshrouded this Kings team for years now, is that they're not tough. They're soft. They give up all of these breakdowns on the perimeter. They fly around and can't defend anybody. They're never, ever physical with you or aggressive in executing whatever game plan they have on the defensive end, and they get fucking stepped on, which ultimately just puts more and more and more and more pressure on the offense to deliver. And honestly, I think that's a big fucking component of why Keegan Murray, Kevin Huerter, all these dudes are shooting absolute buns, is because there's so much fucking pressure on them to hit all of these shots because there's no defensive integrity or identity or shred or concepts of an identity on this fucking roster. So therefore, every single shot that you take on offense just gets magnified in importance, which even further elevates the pressure of even attempting a three, which we all know was so integral to this team's offensive firepower before. And now they're only 21st in three-point attempts. I don't think anybody wants to miss a fucking three, so therefore, I don't think a lot of motherfuckers want to even shoot a three. So when you put this much pressure on your offense to consistently deliver because you don't give an absolute fuck about defense and nobody takes any degree of pride on that end of the floor besides Keon Ellis, who clearly Mike Brown does not trust in heavy minute rotations for some fucking reason I do not understand. I don't think a lot of these Sacramento Kings even want to be shooting these threes. Case in point, they're only 21st in attempts. And then when they actually shoot, they miss a ton of them, again, because there's so much pressure on the offense to deliver. It's an unsustainable model when you are literally walking into a game expecting to be giving up 120 plus points. It doesn't even matter where. As I've already outlined, in the Portland loss, they gave up 70 paint points to DeAndre Ayton and a bunch of nobodies. I'm sorry. And then 2 days later, they go to San Antonio and they get absolutely crucified on the perimeter with a 23-12 three-point deficiency. How the fuck are you supposed to win when you are working off of being down 24 points because of how many open threes you are giving up? What my point is, it should not be in any way surprising that a team that cannot guard the perimeter is so terrified of missing shots, and then it extends even further into even attempting them. So that is what I mean with the atrophy of the three-point arc in the arsenal of the Sacramento Kings, is they went from a high volume and high efficiency rating from the perimeter to a very low volume and a very low efficiency rating from the three-point line. There's just too much pressure on the offense. Like Mike Brown pointed out, guys are really, really trying to make an impact on the offensive end by leaking out too soon when there's a missed shot by their opponents, and all of a sudden there's a 50-50 ball that nobody's laying their fucking body out to secure and actually end the overall possession, because again, you are oscillating between frantically trying to patchwork some degree of defensive resistance to absolutely blazing at 120 miles an hour to get out and run on the offensive end and stand a chance to counterbalance exactly what the first part was. So this is a losing formula on both ends of the equation, and I don't understand how the dialogue around the Kings is so vocally oriented around the offense. Let me teach you something very, very fundamental about NBA basketball. Offense will innately be more volatile throughout the course of a game. You hear players say it, coaches say it, they made shots, they missed shots, shots go, shots come back, what the fuck ever. All of the great teams have in common a serviceable enough defense to weather those droughts for their offense to stand a chance. This is why the Mavericks acquired Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. This is why the Hawks drafted Zachary Risacher #1 overall. Even though he couldn't fucking shoot, it's because he gave a shit and knew he needed to grind on the defensive end and employ his insane length to really fill in those gaps. These are just screeching examples of how inept this Sacramento Kings administration has been as far as roster construction. The Mavs fucked around and found out if you don't play defense, you literally will not be able to stand a chance come the postseason because again, offense will inevitably fluctuate. The Atlanta Hawks made it to the Eastern Conference Finals as a total fluke, having a terrible defense, and what do you know? They have not even come close to recapturing that level of postseason success. Mark my words and Pascal Siakam's after the Eastern Conference Finals last year, when we say defensive buy-in and identity is the fucking requirement to even stand a chance in the postseason. The trick to contend in the NBA is to have a top 8 to 10 superstar that can close on games and to have a top 8 to 10 defense that is going to allow enough weathering of the organic fluctuation in offensive potency. And it's even beyond scheme and matchup and all of these things. You're not even going to consistently contend against a team like the San Antonio Spurs in the Western Conference that has 1.5 million fucking things to figure out about itself if you do not have a high enough defensive floor. It is so blatantly obvious, and it is an absolute travesty that this team has to be going through such a demoralizing stretch of consistent losses. Yes, the opponent, but holy shit, if you tune into these games, yo, we are watching guys dance around these perimeter defenders like it's the fucking YMCA. It is absolutely atrocious and humiliating for this team right now. And it is absolutely the reason why they went out and acquired Jay Crowder the night after that Oklahoma City game, because they know they need that defensive toughness and a serious veteran voice to start slapping these fucking kids around and getting them to buy the fuck in on defense. Everybody knows Jay Crowder's a winner. It really doesn't matter wherever he's gone. He's been on a team that has missed the playoffs once in his 13 years in the NBA. And with any guy like that, aside from, I guess, your offensive superstars like James Harden, who just never misses games and is very, very talented in his own right, right? Like, most of the time, these guys that get their careers to reach that certain extent is because they know how to win. And how to win is understanding and recognizing the importance of defensive details and how they accumulate throughout 48 minutes, 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 games in a playoff series. Like, it is so blatantly obvious that they were desperate to get someone in there to get the broader team to buy in.
It's been great. It's been great so far.
What has that part been like with the players in terms of being welcomed and getting acclimated?
Well, they want me to start talking right away, and I'm trying to fill them out first before I just give them the whole dosage of me, but they want me. They want me to, my voice, and want my presence, so I'm just trying to give it to them and still trying to learn each and every player, still trying to learn the playbook, still trying to learn the coaches, you know, just still trying to learn, but I just want to still be myself, and I'm a leader, naturally born leader, and I love to win. I do whatever it takes to win. I'm not a selfish player. I'm a team first player, so I do anything to help my team win, and that's the message I want to rub off to the guys. I'm here to win. I have no agenda besides winning.
I've been saying this for years now. It is not that you need a Draymond Green on every single team, but you need some source of toughness, whether it's by committee or it's a Dylan Brooks or a Josh Hart or whatever it is. We all know what I mean. You need somebody to take pride on that end who is, one, not willing to get pushed around individually and is able to walk the walk, but is also able to talk the talk, not across the court even, although that is very, very fucking useful, I believe, but to talk the talk internally at your fucking guys. If you are getting wide open threes for Chris Paul to hit a dagger 26-foot pull-up without anybody within 8 feet of him, with that close of a scoreboard, that late in a game, after having a 17-point lead earlier on, and nobody is gonna get on each other's asses to get their shit together, you're just not a serious team. And there should be absolutely zero expectation in not only succeeding in the postseason, but making any sort of headway into play-in or playoff seeding territory.